When it comes to the 2018 legions that were formed during the Great Crusade, there are a lot of them, and a lot can be learned about them when you look further past their surface level attributes to see what lies underneath, learning about what caused them to be the way that they are today. Hello, my name is Cyan Sun, but you can just call me Cy. Firstly, I want to thank you for clicking on this video to begin with, as in this video, I am going to be talking about my favorite aspect of each legion from the Space Marine legions of Warhammer 40K. Before I start, I do want to say that I am dumb. This is not an informational video, and a lot of where I get my information is from videos, websites, and games. I've read a few books, but I've only been getting into Warhammer for about 5 years now, and am no expert in any way. So there is a chance that some of my information is wrong at some point in this video. So if I get something wrong, please don't blow me up. This video is about mainly my opinions above anything else, as Space Marines are my favorite faction in Warhammer just in general. But with that out of the way, I do hope that you enjoy this video, and let's start with the first legion, the Dark Angels. The Dark Angels are overall not among my favorite legions, but there are things I do like about them, like their general aesthetic. I'm not a big fan of the color scheme. I've never been the biggest fan of green, most shades really. I do like the knightly look they have though, as I've always been a big fan of knights and their general aesthetic, so the Dark Angels have a very similar look to that, and I like how they look. Then there is the more secretive aspect of their legion, where certain information is only known to a select few at the top, and even less outside the legion have any information on certain things, like the Fallen for example. The back and forth of the Dark Angels being this honored knightly legion, but having secrets within secrets is a very interesting dichotomy to me. Then there is the Lion himself. I never had too much care for him when I first started learning about him, but the way he's been written since he's woken back up from his slumber in modern day makes me find him far more interesting than I used to. Going from this prideful man that's always quick to act in any situation to a patient, more forgiving individual has made me find him far more noteworthy than I did before. And also, his age decreasing his strength and speeds adds a little more tension to his fights, because he can't just rely on his strength and skill like he used to before. Well, as much as he used to before. However, with that out of the way, since the second legion isn't and has never been real, we shall be going straight to the third legion, the Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children, to be completely honest, I don't like much about the Legion itself before or after the Horus Heresy. I haven't found too much about them very interesting. Granted, I don't know much about them to begin with, other than the fact that they are good swordsmen and are very skilled with using a sword, in more ways than one after the Heresy, I guess. But maybe if I knew more, perhaps there would be more for me to like. However, I do like Fulgrim and how he fell from the man he once was. There are multiple Primarchs that had a descent of sorts where there was a possibility that they could have been an amazing person that made the lives of all of those around them better in every way, but were prevented from achieving them for one reason or another. Angron and Conrad are the first two that come to mind, but the difference for me is that Fulgrim was an amazing person. It wasn't a hypothetical. We saw how great of a person he was and how he wanted to help others to achieve their own forms of perfection. He was a genuinely loyal son of the Emperor who seemed to care for his own sons. His fall from grace felt even worse as we saw how great of a person he was. And if it wasn't for that demon sword, he might have joined the loyalist side during the Horus Heresy. And I guess that's how I feel about the Legion as a whole. As a whole, most of the Emperor's Children fell in a similar way to Fulgrim, at least from what I can tell, reflecting their Primarch. It's a tragic story that's told through them, highlighting the good they did during the Great Crusade, but also emphasizing the monsters they would become later on. Then there is also the friendship between him and Ferris as well, and I will get into that when I talk about the Iron Hands. But with that, I don't have much else to say about the Emperor's Children, so we go to the next legion. The Iron Warriors, the only traitor legion that I find myself really liking. I like their color scheme, I like their design and general aesthetic, the way they fight, and even the big man himself, Peter Turbo. Perturabo is an interesting character to me as his downfall is on himself as well as his adoptive father and the Emperor and how they treated him. Being pushed to become his own worst enemy is what I find interesting about him. So much talent, such an intelligent individual even among his brothers, and yet his spite got the better of him, pushing him to make decisions that only resulted in his downfall. He's a superhuman demigod that kept making decisions that resulted in his own downfall like I have in my life. He just wanted to be an architect and never got the chance due to how those around him saw him as nothing more than just a tool of war. He's an understandable jackass that's good at his job, and I like him because of that. I see a little reflection of myself in him when it comes to his past decisions coming back to haunt him, and I find how he was written interesting. I do also like the Legion itself. I like the siege warfare and the heavy artillery, the way they use demon engines. I like the way they fight with siege warfare, big emplacements that blow everything up, and if anything survives, you get in there and blow it up with something point blank to finish the job. I like the Iron Hands for who they were in the Great Crusade and who they are now. Even Perturabo's demon form is my favorite between the demon Primarchs. And also, as a little side thing, the dichotomy of Perturabo doing really cool stuff, like fighting Demon Angron one-on-one and actually winning, but at the same time he throws temper tantrums like a child when he realized he chose the wrong side during the end of the Horus Heresy, is incredibly funny to me, and it makes me like him even more. However, with that, that's all I have to say about the Iron Warriors, so it's time to talk about the best Legion ever, and I am not biased. The White Scars, or Jagatai's Horde. I love the White Scars. They are my favorite Legion and my favorite modern day chapter. I have always enjoyed going fast in games or in real life when I run, and that's the main way the White Scars fight. So their hit and run tactics is right up my alley, as the way that they fight is first in, first out. And their culture is one of the things I enjoy the most about the Legion, as Jagatai's main goal on his home planet was to bring everyone together as equals into one big clan. So when he got his Legion, his goals were not so different. So one of the most important things to him was getting his Legion to understand the Tregorian ways of life of his people as a way to bring everyone together. Even making the effort to make sure his Legion had more to their lives than just fighting. With arts, brotherhood, and culture, all of these things are meant to give life more enjoyment outside of just fighting. But that doesn't mean that they don't like fighting, as the White Scars enjoy their battles almost similarly to the Orcs in how they love the thrill of the fight. They chant and laugh as they ride into battle, as for a Tregorian warrior, fighting alongside your Khan on the battlefield is one of the best ways to live and one of the best ways to die. And Jagatai himself is one of my favorite Primarchs, the swift and silent barbarian. A man that few understood as he was very aloof when it came to his goals. When he got his Legion, one of the first things he did was ride out to the outer edges of the galaxy out of the way of the Imperium, where the Legion was given missions and they were free to do them as they saw fit. Jagatai's character was always the most interesting to me, as what he wanted was to just feel free, to take his ships and go wherever he wanted to. And it wasn't until the Heresy in which he would understand that his life purpose was to be a defender of humanity, giving up his chance to have a galaxy he could freely roam by joining Horus in the Heresy, as he believed that the future that the Emperor wanted was better for humanity than what Horus would have done, despite believing that the Emperor was a tyrant, and Jagatai did hate kings that acted like tyrants that hid behind their walls. But at one point he did come to understand why the Emperor did some of the things he did, like lie about the Webway project, making him have more of an understanding of the Emperor and even feel sympathetic towards some of the less idealistic things that the Emperor did, but was not completely blind to them regardless. Honestly, I could keep going on about things about what I like about Jagatai, like the fight between Mortarion and Jagatai, or how Jagatai had a council where him and his Legion could speak as equals, or Ilya, a ship member he had a sibling-like bond with. But I'll stop here and move on to the Wolves. The Space Wolves, another Legion that I don't really have a very heavy opinion on. They are fairly straightforward as into what they do and who they are, so the interesting parts about the Space Wolves are their characters and what they do. from Bjorn the Fell-Handed to Leman Russ himself, and things like the Months of Shame where the Space Wolves fought against the Grey Knights in a civil war so that the Space Wolves could protect a bunch of guardsmen that the Grey Knights wanted to kill since they had demon exposure. And the obvious aspect of the Space Wolves being that they were the ones that made the two legions that never existed cease to be, cementing themselves as the Emperor's executioners. And that's the part I find the most interesting about them. Leman Russ is known for being a very fun-loving, loud man that has his fill of alcohol and then some. And I imagine his legion is similar to this. But at the same time, Leman Russ and his legion have done some of the most brutal things to other legions, at least until the heresy, making them both fun-loving warriors but also brutal savage beasts at the same time. Then there are also things like the Wolfen, and how that affected the Space Wolves as well, how they tried to hide it when the genetic mutation first began to show itself. But otherwise, I don't have too much else to say about the Space Wolves. I'm pretty neutral on the Space Wolves, nothing about them really intrigues me, but I do recognize the appeal of them just being space Vikings with their own twists, and there being a little more to them than what lies on the surface. They got cool characters, they've done cool stuff, and I like them for it. And with that, let's get a little defensive for the next legion. Next is the Imperial Fists, an interesting group of stubborn defense specialists. I'm not the biggest fan of the Legion itself, I don't like the color scheme that much, and I'm not the biggest fan of their fighting style, but I do like how these guys are the get things done sort of guys. They don't cut corners, they are told what they need to do, and then they get it done. They'll show up, they'll hunker down, they'll hold a position until their dying breath, and when they feel like it, they can use the pain glove if they feel like doing some meditating. Which is also another interesting aspect for me, is that they try to become stronger through the concept of conquering their pain to be the strongest they can be. And at first, I did think Rogel Dorn was a boring Primarch based off of what I learned about him initially, but the more I learned about him, the more I liked him as I found him more interesting than I thought I would. As the way I heard him described before made him sound like a blank slate of a person, and I don't think that's what he is. He's cold and blunt, but not without personality. The way he was written makes it so that his blunt manner of speaking is a personality trait in and of itself. Like when he fought Demon Fulgrim during the heresy on top of the walls during the siege of Terra, where Fulgrim kept trying to taunt and monologue at Dorn, but Dorn just completely ignored him and just kept hitting him, cutting his speeches short, which I thought was very funny. And Dorn is capable of expressing emotions as well, like his anger towards Sigismund or his wrath that he can hold towards his enemy on the battlefield, and even how he felt empty towards the end of the Horus Heresy, being drained of giving everything he had in order to win that war, barely ever taking any rests. Dorn has a lot more to him than I thought he would, and I guess that's how I feel about the Legion as a whole. I thought that they were boring at first, but upon learning about their culture, their acts, their characters, I learned that there was more to them, and that made them more interesting to me. I don't love them, but I do like them more than I did before, except for the color scheme. I really don't like that bright yellow. So let's look at another Legion that has a color scheme that I like a little bit more. The Night Lords, the Slavic-inspired edgelords that got some good writing. And it's that great writing that I love about them. Their characters are the most notable part about their legion, like Conrad and Sevatar, as well as a few others that currently don't come to mind right now, but I do really like the Legion and the irony of its ranks being repopulated by criminals, making their Primarch hate his own Legion with the exception of a few, and Conrad himself trying to rid his world of crime, making it a better place from others until he began to lose his mind, gaining a twisted sense of justice, having almost a hypocritical sense of morale, and any time those views of his were challenged, in a way he couldn't deny, it would begin shattering his views, showing that the lives he took and what he did was unjustified, going against everything that he had believed or made himself believe. The characters of the Legion, the culture, and how they're written is overall what I enjoy about them. I don't really care about how they fight or operate as a Legion, but after learning more about them and their characters, I get it. They're pretty cool, and there's a lot to enjoy about them despite them being literal scum, but otherwise I don't really have much to say about them, so let's go to something a little bit more angelic. The Blood Angels. Honestly, don't have too much to say about them either, as I haven't personally taken that much time to learn about them outside of what's already known in a more general sense. I don't know too much about them, however what I do know I do like. For example, I like the emphasis that the chapter has on art, almost like the White Scars. Art is meant to be something outside of war to express themselves. However, for the Blood Angels, it's meant to help with their rage. The Black Rage and the Red Thirst are interesting flaws, and the fact that they make an effort to hide it from other legions is pretty interesting. But similarly to the other legions, what I find the most interesting about them is their characters. Mephiston and how he conquered the Black Rage, Dante and how he continues to fight despite not wanting to, and Sanguinius himself being a genuinely amazing person that always helped those that he could and improved the lives of those around him, especially his legion, in a way that many few could, even among his brothers. Good men forced into fates they did not ask for. I think that's what makes me care about the Blood Angels as much as I do, and it's their characters and the way that their characters act that I find interesting. Otherwise, I don't know too much about the way the Legion fights or the specifics about their culture outside of the more artistic aspects about them, but everything that I already mentioned that I do know of is pretty neat, and I am interested to take the time to learn more about them later on. However, let's find out why the flesh is weak with the next Legion. Iron Hands, another legion I really like. I love their aesthetic, their emphasis on using vehicles in war, their bionic upgrades, and then there is the obvious elephant in the room of Ferrus Manus being one of the first Primarchs to die on the battlefield during the heresy and how that affected the legion. Ferrus wasn't the nicest person. He did have a bit of a temper and was somewhat uncaring when it came to relationships, but he was still capable of having them, as you had to earn his respect, but once you did, you would have a reliable friend on your side. And that's what Fulgrim had, as they became true friends in ways their other brothers really didn't. Their love for forging and crafting, the desire to improve oneself at any given opportunity to achieve some level of perfection is what pushed them to understand one another and become true friends, even trusting one another with their life. So when Fulgrim was pushed to the edge by the demon in his blade and Ferrus was killed, it wasn't just two demigods killing each other. It was two friends losing one another in what they had in life. And the Iron Hands did not take the death very well, as years later they came to the conclusion that it was Ferrus's temper and their own weakness that got him killed. So they turned to ridding themselves of emotion to strengthen themselves. But honestly, it was more a way to deal with the death of their Primarch than anything else. And the irony of doing this is that the bionic upgrades and ridding themselves of emotions are both things that Ferrus would have disapproved of, turning his legion into something he would hate to see if he was still alive, as he even wanted to remove the metal from his own arms one day when the fighting was done. And the battle cry of the Iron Hands shows the purest form of this irony, as in modern day, their chant is "the flesh is weak," but that is only half the saying, as the full line is "the flesh is weak, but deeds endure," saying that the flesh has its limitations and it will decay one day. But what you do to help others, as how you affect the lives of those around you, is what will be remembered, as your flesh will decay, but your deeds will not. And as Vulcan said this to Ferrus, time twisted the saying into something else than what it was actually meant to be. I like the Iron Hands because I get it. Emotions suck. And at one point in my life, if we had the technology, I probably would have considered doing what they did when it came to ridding yourself of emotions and heavily suppressing them. The Iron Hands were hurting, and this is how they coped, but it didn't fix anything. It just gave them a way to endure the pain. The Iron Hands hate themselves and their weakness. Their inability to save their Primarch made them feel weak, so they started destroying themselves to fix what they saw was a problem, becoming something their predecessors would have hated to see them become. I like the Iron Hands for multiple reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is I get it. But let's go to a legion that feels one very aggressive emotion. The World Eaters, a bunch of depressed berserkers. I've never been the biggest fan of the Berserker archetype in any way really, but I do kinda like the world leaders because just the idea of fighting them is horrifying. Granted, fighting any Space Marine is terrifying, but for me, the idea of a Space Marine that's just running towards you, frothing at the mouth, with their only goal being your death. No amount of injuries or blown off limbs will stop them until they are physically incapable of moving or just outright die. But outside of that, like many other legions, what stands out to me is the characterization of them and their Primarch. Angron was doomed the moment he had the nails put in his head, and his legion were some of the few that wanted to be there for him as they were his gene sons. But he hated them because he saw them as the chains that the Emperor had placed on him when he took him away from his family at the final fight of the rebellion on Nuceria, as Angron just wanted to die alongside those he loved and trusted with his life, as the Emperor ripped him away from that final chance, not even helping the rebellion, as Angron was forced away from his family, knowing that only death awaited them, and he couldn't help them. But the Legion wanted their Primarch to care about them, and they tried whatever he told them, but it never worked. He always hated them as he couldn't unsee them as the shackles that the Emperor put on him, forcing him to stay alive while he was still a useful tool to the Imperium. And it wasn't until Lorgar made Angron realize what his legion had done for his approval by putting the nails in their own head, and following after this realization, Angron did truly try to be there. He tried to be a true Primarch for his legion, and after years of pain and suffering, the legion truly got the Primarch they wanted, beginning to see eye to eye and truly appreciate one another. But even that was quickly ripped away from them, as Lorgar had completed his ritual during the crusade against Ultramar, and Angron became a demon Primarch of Khorne, losing his will and his sanity as he became a slave of yet another master. The Legion lost their Primarch that they had gained after years of trying to do so, and with the nails in their head, they had nothing left to their lives but to serve Khorne as crazed killing machines. Angron had the ability to help others, taking away their pain and relieving them of whatever hurt them emotionally. But once the nails were put in his head and his family was taken away from him, the result was that things would never be the way that they could have been, as if in another life he could have landed on a different planet, and perhaps things could have gone far, far better for him and his legion. And perhaps he could have landed on a planet that belonged closer to the one of the next legion we will speak of. Ultramarines, the plot armor guys. I'll be honest, I don't have too much to say about the legion itself because they're kind of just the jack of all trades, the middle road type of legion. There are specific things to them, but in general there is no overarching gimmick, for lack of a better word, I suppose. So because of that, the main thing I'll talk about in this section is mostly Guilliman, because he's really the only thing that I find particularly interesting about the Ultramarines. With that said, Guilliman isn't particularly interesting with what he can do, but how he acts specifically in modern day is what made me start to like him more than I did before. Waking up and seeing what the Imperium had become, making him regret almost everything that had happened up to that point, he wanted to give up, and I honestly don't blame him. But he realized that humanity still kept fighting, that there were people that had hope and kept fighting for a brighter future despite how overtly horrible things were. So who was he, a superhuman demigod that these people looked up to for hope, to give up and let his despair consume him? So he pushed down his pain, he got up, and he got to work. The Ultramarines are the favorite of GW. They get the most stuff, they have the most things happen to them on average, and that's why I get why people find them annoying. It's definitely a problem, and I hope one that gets addressed at some point in some way, so everyone could get something for their own favorite faction. But that doesn't make me hate the Ultramarines. I don't hate them for their popularity, but I also don't find them among my own personal favorites. I like Guilliman and his personality and the way he's been written in modern day, and the best way I think to sum up Guilliman as a character is a comment I saw a few months ago. Some would say he's boring, but in a group of freaks, normalcy is its own unique trait. I like Guilliman. The Ultramarines are a perfectly standard and fine legion that I have no particularly heavy opinion on, regardless of their popularity or anything about them specifically. However, it's time to deal with something that's a little more durable. The Death Guard. I like them. I like the durability aspect of the Legion. Their whole thing is being able to endure more than other Legions. As for an example, I believe one of the first things that Mortarion did when he met his Legion was have them drink a deadly poison that was even dangerous to them as a way to build their strength and resistance. I'm not into super slow heavy hitters when it comes to a style of fighting, but I do like the Death Guard general idea of fighting as they just slowly move forward towards their enemy until the enemy dies. And I do enjoy their aesthetic as well when it comes to the design of their armor and just the general way that they look. And the connection to Nurgle that they get eventually only pushes the aspect of them being stronger and more durable, and I find it interesting that the corruption only strengthens the key aspect of the way that they've already fought. It is also interesting to see Mortarion, someone who absolutely hated Psykers and almost anything warp related to the point that he loathed his brothers who had access to the warp, seeing him get tricked into serving Nurgle, loathing that situation that he found himself in as he essentially became a slave to the thing that he hated. But in modern day, when he was fighting Guilliman, it seems like his mind has been corrupted or twisted in some way, shape, or form, as it almost seemed like he was enjoying being a follower of Nurgle, believing in what Nurgle or Nurgle's followers preached, becoming something that his past self would very likely hate. So it's an interesting idea for me to imagine past Mortarion somehow, some way, seeing his future self and probably hating it. I like the more surface level things about the Death Guard, and overall I'm not a very big fan of the Chaos Legions with the exception of the Iron Warriors. No particular reason, just the general aesthetic of the Chaos Legions, how they tend to look, not really my thing. But in general, I do like the Death Guard. So with that, let's move to the casters when it comes to the Chaos Legions. The Thousand Sons are another legion where I care more about the characters than the actual legion itself. I've never been a fan of casters and stuff, just kind of in general when it comes to games I'm playing or whatever. I like magic stuff, but usually when it's a hybrid of archetypes, like paladins for example, when it's two things combined or when it's something that also uses magic. And the Thousand Sons are mainly just casters, that's like their main thing. So while there are a lot of cool things that make the Thousand Sons stand out, like their aesthetic for example, the way they look is so cool, the Egyptian inspiration really works for them. The Rubicon thing, as most of their army is just dust piloting armor as a ritual went wrong in order to try and cure them of the flesh change, which was slowly destroying their bodies, and at an even quicker pace after serving under Tzeentch, I believe. There is a lot to like, it's just the main thing is that they're spellcasters, and that normally isn't my thing. However, with Magnus, what happens during the Heresy is one of the first things I learned about the Legion actually, and that made me like them for a similar reason that I liked kind of the World Eaters and Fulgrim as well. The prospect of a Legion that would have likely stayed loyal if it wasn't for one or a few major decisions that decided the course of the Legion's future is an interesting idea for me. For Angron, it was the Butcher's Nails on Nuceria, and for Thousand Sons, it was when Magnus tried to warn the Emperor of Horus through the warp, breaking the Webray project, and in doing so, dooming his Legion. And if it wasn't for the fact that the Emperor had probably taken the time to explain what the Webway project was to Magnus, it probably wouldn't have happened. Granted, when Magnus messed up, he really didn't help himself. He made a lot of dumb decisions that only made the situation worse, thinking it was a punishment to be attacked by the Space Wolves, and he didn't have his Legion fight back. He didn't properly surrender. He just went silent, and everything started going horribly wrong. But ultimately, he did still believe in the Emperor's vision, I believe. He did still want to help the Imperium. He wanted to stay loyal. And even so, when Horus was being fooled by Erebus when he had been stabbed by the Anathema Blade, I believe is what it's called, Magnus tried to save Horus from his fate. So things ending up the way that they did still sucks, and the flesh change was always a problem from the beginning for the Legion. They weren't completely doomed from the start, if you count out the flesh change, and perhaps there would have been a way to fix it. But Magnus's own hubris doomed himself and his Legion. I like the Thousand Sons. They're alright with me, they got interesting characters, an unfortunate fate, but with that, let's talk about the other Legion that have sons in their name, the Sons of Horus. The Sons of Horus, or formerly known as the Lunar Wolves. I'll be honest, I have honestly even less to say about the Sons of Horus than probably any of the other legions. I don't know that much about them other than they are an overall assault-based troop, but when it comes to their culture, how they fight in specific manners, I don't really know anything about them. But the things that I do know when it comes to their characters, I do find interesting, as the thing I find the most interesting is seeing how they've changed over time. Like seeing Abaddon, for example, and how he was like before the heresy and what he's like now is interesting, and it's kind of the same for the rest of the Legion. And I do like that Horus wasn't entirely wrong about the Emperor when it came to getting rid of the legions when the Crusade was over, as I think it was implied that at some point when the fighting was over, at least some of the legions would have been hit with the average Thunder Warrior experience, because once the Crusade was over, I can't imagine the Emperor just letting the Night Lords and the World Eaters just go off to do their own thing. And let's be honest, the Emperor wasn't exactly a good father with the best views when it came to his sons, as for the most part he saw them as tools. So the heresy did have some grounds to start on because, yeah, the Emperor was a tyrant and he truly did believe he was doing the right thing, where the ends justified the means, and a lot of people suffered for it, making it more conflicting when it came to the traitors going against the Emperor and the Imperium. Granted, the traitors did horrible things and were eventually corrupted, so they were still definitely in the wrong, but everything that started it wasn't entirely wrong, which is what I find interesting. But other than that, I don't really have anything else to say about the Legion, so let's go to the first heretics. I'm gonna be honest, this is the closest I've ever come to outright disliking a Legion. Not because they're poorly written or have bad characterization, it's just that they're very easy for me to hate, because a lot of the bad things that have happened to a good number of characters I've liked have been because of probably someone from the Word Bearers or just the Word Bearers themselves. Like how Angron becomes a Demon Primarch, or Horus gets tricked into going against the Emperor because of someone from the Word Bearers. They're just a bunch of little fiends, and it's really easy for me to hate them. With that said though, I do like their use of demons, especially the mutual possessions of their marines like Argel Tal. It kind of reminds me of symbiotes from Marvel, obviously not the same thing, but the overall idea is a really cool aspect I really like when it comes to the Word Bearers, and they're kind of just generally being like summoners more than actual marines or fighters, which is a cool spin. I like that, and how the Word Bearers fight and how they use worship and possession and demon summonings in order to kind of handle most of the heavy fights for them. They can still fight, they know how to use weapons, it's just they believe more so in using the power of the Chaos Gods to bolster their strength in ways that they can't do really on their own, using faith above all else. But otherwise, I don't have too much else to say about them, so let's look at the nice guys that burn people alive all the time. The Salamanders are neat, but they are not my favorite. I will admit, they used to be my favorite when I first started learning about 40k because, nice guys. They are still up there on my personal favorite list, but they are no longer outright my favorite, as obviously my favorite's White Scars. They are well known for being the nice ones that tend to go out of their way to aid civilians and just generally be nicer to those that aren't themselves. And I do like that. However, it's the combination of the other aspects of them in tandem with this that make me like them as much as I do. They are the nice ones, but they mostly use fire-related weapons, Melta, Flamers, stuff like that, and it's really cool and fun, and I like those type of weapons, and they're also weaponsmiths, improving gear on their own, making modifications that specifically suit them, or the fact that Nocturne is a death world and how they live on it, or how they can go back to see their own families. The Salamanders are interesting in who they are as a whole, but each aspect is neat, but putting them all together is what makes me like the Legion. The Salamanders are interesting in who they are as a whole, but each aspect is interesting to me. It's just that putting them all together is what makes me like the Legion for who they are as much as I do. I like Vulcan, I like his beliefs, I love his big hammer, it's really cool. And I like the weaponry of the Legion, their chapter rituals are pretty cool as well. Overall, I like the Legion as a whole for who they are, for what they can do, and for their aesthetic, even liking their color scheme. I'm not a big fan of green, but the way that they put it on their armor, it works for me. And with that, let's go to one of the few other Legions that were as close to the Salamanders as the Iron Hands were. The Raven Guard is one of my most liked modern day chapters, just sitting under White Scars and a few other successor chapters. I like how they did the stealth aspect of them. It isn't just the idea of crouching around and pressing X to perform a takedown on enemies, it's also the idea of guerrilla tactics and sniper assassinations. To be more specific, one of the reasons they are able to stealth around so well is because they learn every aspect about their armor and how certain movements make certain sounds. So after training with their own armor for a specific amount of time, they will be able to know what specific leg movement makes an electric popping sound from the fibers in their armor, or what specific arm movement will have the armor scrape against itself. So they're able to learn how to move at specific times in specific ways in order to move as quietly as possible despite wearing literal power armor. And I do think Corvus is pretty cool as well. A stealthy freedom fighter that lost a lot during the heresy, and for the sake of revenge against Lorgar, the one who he believed started all of this, he dove into the war, disappearing, with his final words being "nevermore," I believe, which is really funny and very in character for him. Until the word bearers found out the hard way that he has essentially been turned into a loyalist demon Primarch, hunting down any and all word bearers he finds, especially going out of his way to hunt down Lorgar, to the point that Lorgar is hiding in an unknown location, fearing that, I believe, a prophecy that Lorgar was meant to die is going to come true at the hands of Corvus Corax, because Corvus is unrelenting. He's actually like Jason, or like the boogeyman for the word bearers. Like, the word bearers check under their bed for him. I do also like the black and white color scheme when it comes to how they look. But regardless, I do like the Raven Guard, and I'm going to try to take the time to learn more about them and their culture and how they do things. However, with one last legion to talk about, let's go to the other type of stealth legion that prefer their subterfuge more than anything else. The Alpha Legion is probably one of the most unique legions in my opinion, as what they do is the most different from pretty much any other legion, as this legion specializes in espionage, subterfuge, sabotage. They avoid direct confrontation unless they have a reason to do otherwise with their own marines. The other thing that makes them unique is how much of a mystery they are. So much that surrounds them in terms of information about them are things that are unknown or are only speculative. Like if it was Alpharius or Omegon that were the ones that were killed by Dorn or Guilliman, or if it was neither. There's so much to them in the sense that there are just so many things that we don't have a definitive answer for. And mystery after mystery. Who truly leads them? What is their goal or motive? Do they work for or against the Imperial? And that's what's so fun about them. There's enough to know that there's something there to enjoy with what they do, how they act, or how they all look exactly like their Primarch, and they say they're all Alpharius and they're all lying. But at the same time, there isn't enough that there are still so many questions about them that you just keep speculating about them, like again, if one or both or either of their Primarchs are alive or dead in any way, shape, or form. And if they're alive, does their Legion even know, or is Alpharius just hanging out with his Legion among their ranks without them even knowing? It's hard to tell, and that's the cool part. The Alpha Legion are very unique, and I do like the aesthetic of the armor as well. And just the general idea of who they are is fun, but with that, I am Alpharius, and this is a lie. Oh, well, it's done. This is going to take so long to edit. This is probably going to be one of my longest videos. If you made it all the way through to the end, genuinely thank you. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I know, it's not a good video. It's scuffs, the pacing's all over the place. I'm really bad at transitioning between each legion and segueing between them. I know, it's not good. But if you got all the way through to the end, and on the off chance you did truly enjoy this, thank you, and feel free to tell me what else you could possibly want to see from me. It could be anything of any genre. Well, mostly I'd prefer something games related because that's the thing I indulge in the most, but whatever idea that you think you'd want to see from me, hit me with it, because at the end of the day, this channel is first and foremost for entertaining you and the other people that I hope watched and enjoyed this video and as well. But thank you for clicking on it to begin with. I hope you have a good day, a good night, and whatever goes on in your life goes right. I will hopefully see you in the next video, whatever it'll be, whenever it'll come out, because I really don't have an answer for both. But thank you, and goodbye.